Mark and Marquette's Heel of the Year, Rambo Apocalypse. You are listening to the Ron Talks Tabletop Podcast Super Show Sunday. It is your honor and pleasure that you get to hear the sweet sound of Rambo Apocalypse coming to you one more time, baby.
Hey folks, this is Ron, and this is Ron Talks Tabletop Podcast Super Show Sunday, a section of my podcast where we focus on my favorite game, Super Show the card game. And I like to bring on guests to talk about this topic. Today I have another special guest. So could you introduce yourself? Who are you?
Absolutely. To the Super Show community, I am known as Rambo Apocalypse, the king of media, the high chief of Hollywood, many different names. But to you today, I'm going to be known as Will Priest.
Thanks for coming on the podcast, Will. We don't see a whole lot of Will Priest. We see a lot of Rambo Apocalypse, so I'm glad to have you.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to it.
Today, I wanted to interview you about a number of topics, and we're going to get into the main thing later on in the podcast. But I wanted to start with some questions to kind of get to know you and your background, and we'll get to this big main topic. So the first question I would like to ask is that I have come to know that you are like a huge wrestling fan from your childhood.
Yes.
And I just want to ask you first, like, what is your experience with wrestling fandom?
Oh man, Mr. Rumble, this goes back a long time to I think the first time when I really got into wrestling was about second grade. I had a VHS that I purchased when I was a kid. It was WrestleMania, the greatest matches. And I just thought these were some of the best matches I'd ever seen. It starts off with the Steiner brothers versus the Head Shrinkers at WrestleMania 9. And I absolutely thought that was one of the best tag team matches that I'd ever witnessed. Then some more matches on there. Bret Hart versus Rowdy Piper from WrestleMania 8 for the Intercontinental Championship. You have Hogan versus Andre as the main draw, but then on there as well is WrestleMania 3 that many consider one of the greatest matches of all time is Macho Man Randy Savage versus Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. And I remember watching this tape just over and over again and just being fascinated with all the different elements of wrestling that now I understand as I'm older, but as a kid, you know, of course you love Macho Man, you loved Hulk Hogan, you loved Bret Hart, you loved the Steiners. But as I progressively got older, I kind of leaned more towards the heels because they were just so much more fun to cheer for. That I remember when I was a kid, I thought Razor Ramon was so cool, but I could never cheer for him because he was the bad guy. And now the bad guy, Razor Ramon, is just absolutely one of the best ever as far as, you know, I feel with wrestling is concerned. But I remember just being so young at the time. I had an older brother. He was 16 years older than me. And I remember staying with him one weekend and I wanted to rent WrestleMania 12 so badly. He said, all right, we'll get it or whatever. And before we would watch a match, I would tell him who's going to win. He was like, why in the world did we rent this video if you already know who's going to win? And I said, I didn't really know, but I know now it's because I enjoyed the art form of professional wrestling, being able to watch the Iron Man match as a kid. And just at the time, I was a huge Bret Hart fan, like absolutely loved the excellence of execution. And I liked Shawn Michaels, but I just did not want Shawn to win that Iron Man match. And then I met Chuck, and he was a huge Bret Hart fan, and it turned me into more of a Shawn Michaels fan. So I was glad that it worked out that Shawn Michaels actually won the Iron Man match. So it was just really neat. I remember going to Nitro when I was a kid, went to many Raws, went to house shows. I remember seeing Bret Hart versus The Undertaker in a steel cage match in Huntsville, Alabama. And my mom and I were sitting in the second row, and she was absolutely terrified at the time when Undertaker and Bret were on that side of the cage where we were, that they were going to fall over on top of us. So there's just many, many things that wrestling has always been a part of my life as far back as I remember.
Nice. I grew up watching it. and then like all the way into my 20s.
Hmm.
And then in 2006, when I moved down to Georgia from Michigan, I stopped watching because I wasn't living with a rabid wrestling fan.
Sure.
And then it was only after I got into Super Show that I started watching wrestling again. And speaking of Super Show, let's talk about it. So when and how did you get into Super Show, the card game?
I'm not exactly sure about the dates, but I do know it was the Huntsville Pop Culture Expo 3 years ago that Simple Chuck, none of us went to the expo at the time, that we just didn't really think about it. Wasn't really our thing. Like, yeah, we like all the things at the expo, but we just never really went. And so Chuck said that he was walking through the expo at the time and he heard a bell, which seems to be a common theme with most people that discover Super Show randomly is they hear a bell and they hear all sorts of cheering, and it's like a wrestling event is actually going on. So Chuck, being as huge a wrestling fan as I am, he walks over and he sees, what's kind of going on with the Super Show at the time. And I'm not necessarily sure who all he met. I'm going to assume he probably met Griffin Bell, and I think Bob Dunn was there at the time. Now, I could be wrong, but I believe it was him. And he really hooked Chuck up with some cards that he's a huge New Japan fan. So I know he got a number of New Japan, especially I think he got Naito for sure, and just a number of cards. I know two of the decks he had for sure were Papa Willie and the Wreck, because within the next couple of days, he came over to Drew's house and I was there. And he said, "Hey, I've got this game we need to play." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" Because normally, and Drew will tell you the same thing, we start something as a group and it's very rarely that we stay involved in it. Like the two constants with our group is League of Legends and wrestling for the most part. Like anything else we try. Now, luckily, I escaped the League of Legends trap I got out many years ago, but some of them still are in it to this day. But Chuck discovered the game. He brought the Wreck and he brought Papa Wheelie over. He handed me the Wreck because he knows I'm a huge Jon Moxley fan. And I looked at the card. I was like, "Dude, is this supposed to be Mox?" And he said, "Yeah, kind of, and he kind of explained to me what was going on. And then I looked at Papa Wheelie, and obviously I saw Big Papa Pump, right? And
Right.
so I was immediately hooked. I said, "Tell me what we need to do." And so, he explained the basics of the game. Really early on into the community, somebody that I reached out to that was absolutely fantastic was Chris Pagello. Anytime I had a question, he was the first person that I was going to ask at this time, because I had not even really played in dojo that much. Like we had just, we had been playing locally just because we didn't really know what we were doing. And one of the first people that I played up against and really met was Horse. And anytime I had a question about any part of the game, he's been there since the beginning. So it's crazy to think that it started with those two, and now I've got three binders full of competitors, many of them very rare. I've got a Trent that's autographed. I've got, just so many different things that it's wild to me that I have. And now Rambo Apocalypse is going to be making an appearance in the game. So it's just crazy how far we've come in
That's
such a short amount of time.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And by the way, when I interviewed Drew, he did say just exactly that. Uh, um, and you guys never stuck to games.
Never,
And
ever.
so that was why he hesitated to get into it because he figured it was just a phase. But it's not
And
a phase.
right. And that's the best part is now we've expanded our group even more to, Mr. Pollywood. Like we used to hang out with Mr. Pollywood all the time when we were in high school. Well, once he went off to college, we didn't really see Paul that much anymore. We would play occasional video games with him and, talk to him. But ever since he started playing Super Show, we talk to him absolutely daily. And it's just amazing, that rekindle, and I don't even want to say rekindle the friendship, but it's just, you get to not only meet so many people, but bring friendships back together that you get to, have some fun with, like in the old days.
Yeah, and I'm gonna say this, like the older you get, the more difficult it is to like maintain friendships.
Absolutely.
Just because of just how life goes. It's just fantastic that you're able to maintain that bond because of Super Show. And
Right.
that's one of the many reasons I love the game too, is that that can happen. So, Will, what is it that you love about Super Show? You know, the whole thing.
There's so many great aspects of this game, and that's what I try to sell people with whenever I meet new people. Like when I went to AEW actually this past Wednesday, our waiter that waited on Mrs. Apocalypse and I, he was a huge AEW fan. He didn't really care for cards and dice, but I told him, "Do you like D&D?" And he loves wrestling as well. And he was like, "Yeah." And so I told him the basis of the game. His favorite wrestler is Hangman Adam Page, and I said, "Hey, check out Hangman right here." And I told him we talked about it and then sold him on it. And I told him, we cut promos. This is as close as you'll get to being a pro wrestler without getting a chair shot. You're welcome,
Yep.
Steve Rest. With that, it's just, I love all elements of the game that I'm able to portray this character that is so, to the point of now he's heel of the year, right? Like I cut
Yeah.
this monster MJF like promo on my program Sunday night. That you have the option of you got 30 cards. You don't have to worry about putting in less. You don't have to worry about putting in more. You have enough customization, but at the same time, you have the great equalizer of the die that if you get hot, man, and you got an optimized deck, you got a really good chance of winning. But on the flip side of it, you can have an absolutely optimized deck. And if you roll fives and sixes all day long, it doesn't matter how good your deck is, you're going to lose. So it's that cool aspect as well that gives you kind of a little bit of random and it gives you just enough complexity to keep, people coming back and saying, "Oh, check out this new competitor or this new card line that's going to be, a game changer that you got to include in every deck." That, the 10 through 12 brawling and punching line. Absolutely love it. So just, and as cliche as it is, the community, like you really don't understand it until you get into the game and you go to Grand Gathering. I love the game. It was fun. We enjoyed playing online. I started off playing in Dojo and being called in by Brian Schmidt at the time. And at the time, my Twitter handle was WP2.com and nobody knew who I was. And going in, and one of the first people I beat was Ricky Riot, which was absolutely fantastic that you had this rookie coming in, kind of like Razor Ramon versus 1-2-3 Kid, right? And somehow I pulled the win over Ricky Riot. Don't even know how really
It,
I did it.
it,
And just, it's
it's the
just so
beauty.
much fun.
It's the beauty of this game.
Yes, absolutely.
So, like, if you're skilled in this game, more often than not, you're going to win. But it's the dice. Obviously, there's some randomization element with the cards in the deck, of course. But the dice, as you said, it's a great equalizer, and it's
Absolutely.
fantastic. But there's all these elements to the Super Show. If you want to, you can develop a gimmick, cut promos in character, whatever. It's a role playing game. It's funny, like ask
Mm-hmm.
the guy if he liked D&D. That's a great way to explain it. Now, if you're really into it, this is my role playing campaign.
Mm-hmm.
I play role playing games, and most of the time I am the game master. But like for me, Mr. Rumble is my player character in the Super Show role playing game, and I thoroughly enjoy it. So I know you've been playing Super Show, involved in the community for a couple of years now.
Mm-hmm.
But how are you involved in Super Show? Like, what is your
Sure.
thing for people that are listening that may not know?
So I have a number of different streams that not only do I run, but I'm also on that are sponsored by the official SRG Twitch. So just some of the places that you'll catch me. Sunday night fights. Right now, like I said, I cut my heel of the year promo live the other night, and I said basically on Sunday night fights, Rambo Apocalypse works whenever Rambo Apocalypse wants to work. And I've already told, Schmidt, he knows all these things that it's just, it's a work. None of this is a shoot with Rambo Apocalypse. Just because I say it doesn't mean I actually think this way about people. But I told him, I said, I'll be back on the 21st because I want to sell this promo. You'll also see me on Dojo every once in a while. I'll get picked on Dojo and go in and have a little fun and try to just, brighten up the dojo, enjoy being on, and just have some fun while I'm there and get a few laughs with the people that are on and hopefully provide some quality entertainment. Every other Wednesday night, except for right now, once again, selling the Hill Heat promo. Ignite is going to be off for a little bit. It will be coming back though, but Ignite is a fast hour of Super Show where there is absolutely no downtime at all. It is 1 hour before Dynamite on Wednesdays, that's bi-weekly, and we'll have live promos. We'll have pre-recorded promos. We have commercials. We have matches. We have everything that you could want in an hour of Super Show. Then Friday nights, I have what I love so much is what is my baby is Candy Shop Talk. To me, it's really the best of all worlds with Super Show that we feature members of the community. We feature actual wrestlers. We've had Jordan Oliver on. We've had Joey Sands. We've had KO Princess. We're still in the works of getting more WWX competitors on. We are going to have JT Dunn on at some point. So we enjoy having people on. We talk to them about, how did they get into the game? What do they like about this game? Just, a casual interview. Then we'll have the featured match, which will be, whatever match is booked that week. People reach out to me all the time and ask me, hey, do you got a spot available on Ignite or on Candy Shop Talk? Right now, even though I've kept it pretty much blank, we have been booked solid since December. We've had all of January booked. I knew we were going to take off the first 2 weeks of February, especially February 14th, because, if we did a show on Valentine's Day, it would not be very good. So for anybody involved. So we're coming back the 21st. We're going to have the Norsemen as our guests. And those are the places that you will catch me as far as Super Show is concerned. It's just, I love being able to provide quality entertainment to everybody out there. That I just love either talking about the game, calling color commentary for the game, or just growing the game really. And, people, it's crazy to me that people say coming on Candy Shop Talk, they get nervous. And I'm like, why are you nervous on coming on Candy Shop Talk? Like it's it's no biggie. But I guess to me, I've done 63 episodes now. And at this point, you can just throw me in front of a microphone and a camera at any time, and I'm ready to go as Rambo Apocalypse. So I love being able to do all these things with the community.
Fantastic. SRG just had their annual awards show at Captain Con, which is one of the pillar conventions for Super Show. And I believe that you were, in part or in whole, recognized on a couple of those awards. You want to talk about that?
Yes, sir. So the first one I was recognized for was Best Production of the Year, and I got that for Ignite, which I really do appreciate. Shout out to Phil and Piglet, because honestly, without the Phil Birch and Piglet, who are two members of The Big Picture with me, trademark, without them, Ignite, Candy Shop Talk, none of this would be possible. Phil especially allowed me, he had this idea for Ignite for a while, and he just could not, wrap his mind around how exactly we're going to bring to everybody, who was going to host, how it was going to work. Is it going to be every week? Is it going to be at this time? Whatever we were running into as the issues. And I finally just asked Phil, I said, Phil, just give me a chance. Let me run this first episode. I think I can build a pretty good card and see where we can go from there. And Ignite, I've only received great praise about Ignite. I've enjoyed bringing people at night and look forward to keep doing more of Ignite, but can't do it without those two. And I also received Heel of the Year, which was kind of a shock to me, because if I was going to give anybody Heel of the Year, it was going to be my co-host on Sunday Night Fights, which is the GOAT Brock Smith. Like, people think I'm mean, but to me, like, Brock he doesn't care
I,
anything about who anybody is. He's
I,
going to bury you.
I describe Brock's heat as dirty Dom heat.
Absolutely perfection. That is it to a T. That he has, I go for more of the MJF heat of where, I've been told I'm such a good heel that people want to cheer me, and I'm like, okay, I've got to turn that around and actually go back and try to get some real heat, since I'm actually heel of the year. But just other things that I've done in Super Show. Our locals is the TVA, which is the Total Violence Alliance in Huntsville, Alabama. We have our own locals championship. I'm the current locals champion, and I'm also a two-time TVA champion, which, if you know, TVA is known for being very try-hard, and it's a great honor to be our locals champion. I'm back-to-back Border Wars champion, which I do not believe anybody can ever say that they've done that, and
Right.
I won it with two different teams. I won it with Zach Ashley and Drew the year that we played previously, and then this year I won it with Nick Nimble and Piglet for The Big Picture. intergalactic champion. That was the first LFF gold that I won against Simon Strauss. And it was really kind of like the monkey getting off the back of the TVA, because at that point, Zach had had TVA or had title chances. Drew had title chances, and this was my first one. I went up against Simon, as I said, and using the overgiver, I got the win for the very first LFF gold that went to the TVA. Previously, I was tag team champions with Kurt Polka, which was absolutely such a great storyline. That was long-term storytelling. Just for the viewers that may not know, Kirk and I were sworn enemies. He swears up and down TVA is number 2, that we're not number 1 with anything. And me and him just kept going back and forth. We had a match on stream, and unfortunately, he diced me. He won in about 3 turns. It wasn't a very good showing, but we just kept going at at Grand Gathering last year. He needed a tag team partner for his cash in for the Cookie's Fortune, or not Cookie's Fortune, his Master of Ceremonies that he had. And so Ange brought up the idea, and he loved the idea of teaming with me, that either I cost him the belt and I prove him that don't mess with Rambo Apocalypse, that this is what's going to happen. I'm going to be a nightmare to you. Or the actually thing that happened, that we went to victory. He admitted TVA was number 1, and I actually got to help Kurt get, I believe it was the Grand Slam, because he had been missing the tag team titles. So that was really cool. But the one that's the biggest to me that actually propelled me to superstardom is the Hollywood Heavyweight Championship.
Okay.
And
I want to talk about that a little, break that down.
sure.
So for you folks that are listening that don't know what we're talking about, so Super Show is a wrestling game. And the cool thing about this wrestling game is that we have title belts. So we have these different divisions on different levels of competitive play. We have some at the national level, which, anybody can go for. And then we have like a regional territory level, which is like Will and I are in different play groups in what's called the Deep South region.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a Deep South champion and the Deep South Tag Team champions, of which I am one half of the Deep South Tag Team champion. And Chuck is the Deep South Heavyweight champion. And then we have our local titles, like he's in TVA, I'm in the ACCW. But we also have title belts that are not tied to a specific geographic location. It's just either like some subset of a group, like we have veterans and Split, who I interviewed last year, as the Play True Championship, where if you have a character in a game, you can play for it. The Hollywood Heavyweight Championship is a division started by Phil Birch, who is the leader of the Big Picture faction. Like in real wrestling, we have factions in Super Show, and they do all this production. Will is an integral part of all of the production, but they also have this belt that you can play for. I don't know how you get in the Hollywood division. I think you just ask, and if they like you, they think that you'll be a draw, you can be in. But anyway, so the Hollywood Heavyweight Championship is the title for that division. Go, carry on.
Absolutely. So to answer your question, how exactly do you get into the Hollywood division? Really, we look for people that we think can tell a story, that we want to see people that can go on the microphone, but they also, will have fun with the storyline, that it's not just going to be, the same old, well, I'm going to beat you, blah, blah, blah. And that's the only promo that they cut. That we look for people to really shine when they get a chance to be in the Hollywood division. And the Hollywood belt. So how this came to be was, like you said, Phil developed this belt. He had a birdcage for it. And I was the second competitor in the birdcage, along with Allie. She started. Simon Davner was in it. The Goat Rock Smith, Johnny Correa, and Eddie Fury was in this birdcage. So long story short, I survive until the end. I go up against Brock one-on-one, and at that point, I had enough of an advantage against Brock that he pretty much knew it was over. I won the Hollywood belt, and Phil and I worked very close hand in hand at first about talking about where we wanted to go with the story, what did we want to do with promos and such. And then by the end of my Hollywood Heavyweight Championship reign, he kind of just turned me loose. He said, you do what you want. I don't have to worry about, anything that's going to be produced by you or any promo like that I understand, what you're doing at this point. And that's really when I kind of just separated myself from, the very much with the TVA, we get mistaken for each other a lot. The wildest one that we get is Drew and I get mistaken for each other a lot by Candleman. But which, if you see Drew and I in person, there is a huge difference between Drew Madsen and myself. But that was really kind of my way to say, let me kind of separate myself from the rest of the TVA, kind of get noticed. And just, it was fantastic winning that belt, being able to then win it back from the Misfit when we faced off, and who was going to be the greatest Hollywood heavyweight champion ever. I ended up winning that belt. And as soon as I did, like, Phil and I immediately started talking. He was like, okay, here's what I think we should do. And he had out this whole, storyline of how we were going to do this, who I was going to face. And I said, Phil, I love this idea, but being in the big picture, the idea is not for somebody in the big picture to have the Hollywood belt. We want somebody else to have it. And I said, that's kind of what gave me my start. So I want to give that opportunity to somebody else as well. And it took a little bit of time to sell Phil on this potential storyline because he didn't really want me to vacate the belt. But I told him, I feel this is what was best. I said, you know what, maybe we get the Rumble era to take over as the Hollywood heavyweight champion. And so we had this great tournament to determine a new Hollywood champion. And Simple Chuck has it right now. He's got a great feud going on with Hollywood Ma'am, another competitor. And I can't wait to see how that kind of plays out.
Me too.
It's going to be good stuff. Like those two, for those of you that don't know, Candyman was Simple Chuck's coach whenever we were playing in a Rising Stars event where they pair you a rookie with a coach. And ever since then, the story's kind of written itself with him separating himself and going with another player known as the Grump.
Yeah, exactly. It's been fun. I think we talked about this a little bit, but I wanted to ask here, since you run or help run a few shows, Twitch streams or what have you, what's your general philosophy on booking and planning those shows, and what's involved in pulling them off?
Sure. I'll start with Sunday Night Fights because Sunday Night Fights is the easiest that I have to do. Schmidt really handles everything with Sunday Night Fights. The only thing that I do is we go live for a pre-show 15 minutes before the show starts. So I'll get there about 30 minutes before the show starts. I'll talk to him. I'll ask him, what exactly are we going to be covering that night? Is Monday Night Fights, Tuesday Night Dojo, the things that are be going on. I always try to get those so that way we don't have to sit there with dead air at the end of the show when we do our post show. But I'll ask him the day of. I'll say, okay, what matches do we have? And he's usually pretty good about sending those quickly. And then what competitors, because I like to do a little stat matchup. So that way I can look at what I have going on. So I'll have the competitor's name. I'll have their stats. I'll have a spot for if they're 13, 14, or 15. That's a live stop at those. If there's any live, I'll have that written down. I'll have their path to victory. So if I was actually going to be playing against this competitor, what would I choose to focus on? Would I focus strikes? Would I focus grapples or submissions to try to take me to victory? And then I have a place for their skill cards. So that way I know, hey, their skill card is number 22, insert name here or whatever it is that you want to say. So that's really all that I do besides just get on the microphone and just try to add a little bit of entertainment to the games that's going on. Sometimes my night's easier than others. If two people are going to be playing and they do a lot of talking and they're very entertaining, like recently we had Possum Kang versus Funtime Bob. All the commentary team had to do was sit back and laugh, and it was fantastic. We had a very easy night that night. So some nights are easier than others, but let's talk about what it takes for me to book my shows whenever I do. Okay. So I try to make it as easy as it is for people to be on my show. I'll message people. I'll say, hey, would you be interested in being on at night? Would you be interested in being on Candy Shop Talk? I'd like to do this. And then I'll say, who would you like to face? Is there anybody in particular that if you could play them on stream, who would you like? And so if I can get that person on stream and I think it will be a good fit, we'll do that. I usually try to book those about 2 weeks in advance just to make sure, hey, is everything going to be good? And then I'll do frequent check-ins about every few days and say, hey, is everything good? Are we still on for this? And 90% of the time, once we schedule a match, it is very rare that we had to go impromptu. I think there's only been maybe 2 or 3 times that I've had to actually change the shows completely. And then that's just a whirlwind by itself of trying to do things on the fly while providing quality entertainment and trying to book people to come on at that moment. So I'll just message people. I'll say, hey, what do you want to do? And then bring them on Candy Shop Talk. We try to get either new members of the community or people that we think that they really want to hear from. It's so much fun. The only thing is, it is a lot of work. Doing Candy Shop Talk, I'll have a list of questions that I want to ask the person that's on that night. We usually do some fun and games where we name a faction that, belongs to the game, and they have to name the first member that they think of. Or we do a Mount Rushmore on random things. When you were on, we did books, and you absolutely kicked my tail like it wasn't even close. So it's a whole lot of work that goes into it, but it's worth every moment, because people will come up to me when we're at conventions and be like, I love what you do. Like, thank you so much for Candy Shop Talk. Thank you so much for being on Sunday Night Fights, that sometimes I won't even watch it. I'll just put it on to hear what you got to say for commentary and listen, as the match is being progressed, and I don't even have to watch it. I just enjoy hearing what you got to say and calling the match. So when I get compliments like that, it's, and I walk into Grand Gathering 4 and Schmidt announces me, and it's like a bomb goes off that people start cheering. And the first person that comes up to me in the game, Press 1P is one of my biggest rivals that I'll drag his name through the mud in a heartbeat. But in real life, John Pulverino was the first person that came up to me, shook my hand, and hugged me when we were at Grand Gathering, because it was good to see him. So it's just a whole lot, but the payoff is worth it.
Fantastic. The guys with the big picture, you bring a lot to the community, and it's really appreciated. Like, you're not going to get this in Magic the Gathering.
No.
This is one of those things that makes Super Show special, folks. So if you haven't tried the game out, what you waiting on? I got plenty of videos on the YouTube channel,
Right? Shame on you.
supershowthegame.com. Yeah. So Will, what's next for you in the Big Picture Premium trademark?
Mr. Rumble, I'm so glad you asked that. So I've been in talks with, I'll go ahead and tell you, I'll spoil it here. I've been in talks with the Starbreaker Trey Cantrell and TVA Commissioner Drew Madsen to bring a deck building show to Big Picture Premium. It's going to be called Stacked Card. We discussed it briefly on Candy Shop Talk last week. But if you had ever seen Blind Tech, and if any of the viewers have not, it was a show by Johnny Correa and Piglet where they would take competitors that the community suggested or just talk about some deck teching that would help a player get into the game. Because when I first got into the game and the rest of the TVA got into the game, we didn't really know much of what we were doing. Like, we had an idea, but we just didn't get it until maybe a year or so in. That's when we started, really optimizing our decks, understanding, kind of how everything worked. To have a show to come back, because Johnny Correa and Piglet, unfortunately, cannot bring back Blind Tech anytime soon. So we're going to be bringing Stacked Card. It's still to be determined when exactly that show is going to start and at what time slot it will be on. But it's basically going to be Blind Tech, where they're going to talk about deck taking strategies, what spectacles to use, what cards you should use in this. And I look forward to that coming forward. We've also got other shows in the works. We've had the scouting report with Coach Brad and Brock that was met with rave reviews, that was grading the Cookie Fortune that they did a grading of. And unfortunately, the problem is that you just run into scheduling with trying to get all these shows. So we are still looking forward. Right now, I'm interested in hearing. I want to give people the same opportunity that I was given by Schmidt. Like, Schmidt reached out to myself and the prize fighter about being on commentary when he didn't have a commentary team at the time. And we didn't know if it was actually going to work or anything, because at that time, Brock was back in school and he didn't have time to be on. And Schmidt at that time needed somebody to fill in. And so he reached out to both of us. And luckily, Simon and I, which we get along great in real life anyways, but we just clicked so well with our commentary that Schmidt was like, y'all are on every week. If y'all will be on, we would love to have you. And so I want to kind of extend that same courtesy to others of, let somebody host Ignite, let somebody host a Beatdown, which is what we had this past Sunday with the Old School Open. talking about the old school open, the last thing that Big Picture really has going on right now is the old school open, which is featuring old school competitors in our game, which is kind of like Stung. You get the Stone, you get Luke Warren, Stephen Houston. So you can kind of see where these competitors come from. And then you get other ones like El Blanco Diablo and ones like that. But right now, we are having a single elimination tournament that's sponsored by Big Picture Premium. And we are currently in, I think we just actually reached, as we're recording, we have reached is it the semifinals? Let's take a look and see. But we've got all the first round matches played, and it's been great. We've had all of the matches streamed except for one. I love it because we're giving people opportunities that, may not necessarily get them in a normal tournament. So right now, the people we have left in our tournament is the antagonist. We have Brimelight, Flame Fighter, Titan, Ref Dave, the back, your arch rival, the LFF chiropractor, and the moneymaker, Stephen Hines. So we got some good matches lined up. We're going to either get those streamed on Big Picture Premium or try to get them on SRG. And if we can't do that, the Flame Fighter has graciously reached out and said he would be happy to stream if he's available at the time. So we got lots of big things cooking at Big Picture Premium. It's a good time to be a part of the big picture.
Fantastic. Can't wait to see how things develop, particularly stacked card, because
Mhm.
I really like blind tech. So
I mean, it just helps so much. I mean, I think of it as, like I said, first year Will coming into the game. If we would have had a show like Blind Tech where I could have, even just popped in the chat and asked questions about things that I didn't necessarily understand and just have, like that live interaction as compared to, posting on the discussion group is fine. But, to have somebody in that moment that you're talking to would just be fantastic and offering deck advice.
all right. So, Will, I have one final question, which I ask all my guests that come on to my podcast here. Will, what is something interesting about you that people may not know about?
I thought about this one because huge fan of your programming. I love it. Keep up the amazing work. And I knew this was going to be the last question. And I've been mulling all day. I'm like, where do I go with this? Like, do I talk about being teacher of the year in 2020 for the Valley's top teacher? Do I do something like that? But I thought, you know what? Let me give me some real content here that nobody really knows aside from maybe some people in the TVA. As I stated earlier in the interview, I had an older brother. He was 16 years older than I was. His name was Chris. When I was in fourth grade, Chris passed away. So I was about 10 years old, and he would have been about 26, 27 at that time. It was really tough, that losing a brother at that age, and I didn't really understand the magnitude of it. He had two kids as well, Macy and Jake. His wife didn't really get along with my mom too much. So, things didn't really shape out too well. And so it makes me appreciate Mrs. Apocalypse. It makes me appreciate my family that I have, still to this day. I have a little sister now. I'm about 16-ish years older than her name is Layla. So it's just pretty neat to be able to appreciate that thing. And I'm hopeful that maybe one day, that I thought about this today as well. I said, how cool would it be if I could put my brother Chris? Now, what would be his gimmick? What would be his stuff? Anything like that? I don't know. All I know is Chris to me was like this larger than life person. Like he worked out all the time. He played football. When I played football, my friends knew I wore number 30. But the reason why I wore number 30 whenever I played sports was in honor of him. So I thought about that today, that I was like, you know what? I think eventually I want to put Chris in the game. And how cool would it be if one day I had Rambo Apocalypse on a tornado with my brother?
Wow. Dude, I can identify. I'll just leave it at that.
It's tough, but it's just the fact of, that I'm so glad that you brought me on for this interview because Mr. Rumble, I actually never would have thought of that until, I was sitting there today, just decided what information do I want to share. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to give him some real good information here and let him know something truly that very few people in this community know about me.
Well, thank you for that. I really appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
And Will, where can we find you?
Oh, you can find me all kinds of places. You can find me on Sunday Night Fights on the SRG Universe Twitch page. You can also find me multiple times a week if I'm running Ignite or Candy Shop Talk on Big Picture Premium, all one word, on Twitch. We are also available on YouTube with the same name. And then, of course, I'm on Facebook as well as Rambo Apocalypse.
And so, folks, you can find him there. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much. It's great being on this side of the interview for a change. Like I was talking about that earlier. I was like, this is the first time that I've been on this side in 63 or I guess 62 interviews, because Candyman did interview me once. But this is the first time in 62 episodes of something that I've been on this side. So thank you so much. I really do appreciate you for getting the community to learn more about Will instead of just simply associating Will Priest only as Rambo Apocalypse.
This is why I do this.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for listening to the Ron Talks Tabletop Podcast Super Show Sunday. And until next time, see you later.